Chimpanzees have almost the exact same number of hair follicles as you do. Read that again. Not fewer, not close. Almost the exact same number, packed across almost the exact same amount of skin. You are not, in any meaningful sense, less hairy than a chimpanzee. Your hair is just microscopic. Thin, pale, nearly invisible strands standing in for what used to be a full coat of fur. So the question was never, why don't you have hair? You have plenty. The real question is stranger, and it's the one scientists spent more than a century arguing about. Why did the fur disappear while the follicles stayed behind? Every animal that shares your family tree is covered. Gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, every single close relative you have is wrapped in the same thick protective coat that mammals have relied on for tens of millions of years. Fur regulates body temperature. It blocks the sun. It cushions against scrapes, bites, and cold nights. It's such a basic piece of mammalian equipment that losing it should be an evolutionary catastrophe. And yet, at some point, your ancestors lost it anyway. Stripped down to bare skin, out in the open on a landscape crawling with predators built to be faster and stronger than they were. If fur was armor, your ancestors walked out onto the battlefield without it. That should have ended things quickly. It didn't, and the reason it didn't is one of the strangest, most elegant survival stories in human evolution. For a long time, the explanation people reached for was simple. Humans invented clothing, so we didn't need fur anymore. It sounds reasonable. Clothes keep you warm, fur keeps you warm. Swap one for the other and move on. But that explanation has a timing problem, and the evidence that exposed it came from an unlikely source: lice. Human body lice are a strange, incredibly specific little organism. Unlike head lice, which cling to hair, body lice can only survive in clothing. No clothing, no habitat, no body lice. Which means the moment humans started wearing clothes is written into the DNA of a parasite that has been riding along with us ever since. Geneticist Mark Stoneking used exactly that. By comparing the genetic divergence between human head lice and human body lice, his research placed the origin of clothing at roughly 170,000 years ago. Sit with that number for a second. Genetic evidence for skin loss and reduced body hair points to changes that were already well underway more than 1,000,000 years earlier. Which means there is a staggering gap, hundreds of thousands of years wide, where your ancestors were already naked, already furless, and had absolutely nothing to wear. They weren't cold and inventing a solution. They were bare-skinned, exposed, and surviving anyway, for an enormous stretch of time, with nothing covering them at all. So clothing isn't the answer. Clothing came far too late to explain it. Something else had to happen first, something that made losing fur worth the risk, long before anyone had the ability to replace it with anything. To find the real answer, you have to stop thinking about fur as a coat and start thinking about it as a problem. Picture the environment your early ancestors were moving through. Open savanna, direct equatorial sun, brutal daytime heat. Now picture trying to run in that heat wearing a full-body fur coat. Every one of the fast predators around you, lions, cheetahs, wild dogs, is covered in exactly that kind of coat. And it's precisely why none of them can run for very long in full heat. They overheat fast. A cheetah can hit blistering speed, but only in short bursts because its body has no efficient way to release that heat while sprinting. This is where the work of biological anthropologist Nina Jablonski becomes essential. Jablonski, at Penn State, has spent decades studying the evolution of human skin and hair, and her research points to a hunting strategy that explains almost everything: persistence hunting. Early humans didn't need to be faster than their prey. They needed to be able to keep moving after everything else had to stop. A hunting group could follow an animal for hours, sometimes for most of a day, across open, sun-baked terrain, never catching up in a single burst of speed, just never allowing the animal a moment to fully cool down. Eventually, in the heat, the animal's body would give out. Heat stroke would do what raw speed couldn't. But that strategy only works if the hunter's own body can survive that same brutal heat for hours at a stretch, and that requires a cooling system fur was never built for. This is the trade your ancestors made. They lost the fur, and in exchange, their skin filled with something almost no other mammal has in comparable density: eccrine sweat glands. Millions of them spread across nearly the entire body, releasing sweat that evaporates directly off bare skin. It's an extraordinarily efficient cooling system. Far better than panting, far better than fur-covered evaporation. It's the same system doing the exact same job every single time you go for a run and start to sweat. Losing your fur didn't make your ancestors weaker in the heat. It made them the most heat-resilient endurance runners on the entire savanna. Every other predator had to stop. Your ancestors didn't. That single trade, fur for sweat glands, opened up a hunting strategy nothing else on that landscape could compete with. And it explains why something that looks, on the surface, like humans losing their natural protection was actually humans gaining the single greatest endurance advantage in their environment. But losing fur didn't come free. It created a brand new problem, one that had nothing to do with heat and everything to do with the sun itself. Fur isn't just insulation, it's also a shield against ultraviolet radiation. Strip it away, and bare skin is now taking direct, prolonged UV exposure every single day, for an entire lifetime, generation after generation. That kind of exposure damages DNA. It breaks down folate, a nutrient essential for reproduction and healthy development. Left unprotected, this becomes a serious evolutionary liability. This is the second half of Jablonski's research, and it's the twist that reframes the entire story. The evolution of dark skin pigmentation appears to be a direct evolutionary response to fur loss. Melanin acts as a natural UV shield, protecting the skin and the folate beneath it from that constant radiation. Fur loss didn't just create sweat glands. It created the evolutionary pressure that shaped human skin color itself. Two of the most visible traits that define the human body, the almost total absence of visible fur, and the deep variation in skin tone across human populations, both trace back to the exact same evolutionary event. One survival adaptation that solved a heat problem, and in solving it, created an entirely new problem that had to be solved right alongside it. So here is the real answer, laid out in order. Your ancestors lost their fur, not because of comfort and not because of clothing, but because bare skin covered in sweat glands let them out-endure literally everything else in their environment in the heat of open daylight. That trade came with a cost. Unprotected skin under constant sun. And the body adapted again, evolving pigmentation as a shield against exactly that cost. Every step connects. Nothing here is random. It's a chain of cause and effect stretching across more than 1 million years. Written not in stories but in genetics, in fossil evidence, and even in the DNA of a parasite that happened to be along for the ride the entire time. The next time you go for a run and feel sweat rolling down your skin in the heat, you're not experiencing a flaw in your design. You're experiencing the exact adaptation that let your ancestors chase down animals stronger and faster than they were, on a landscape where almost every other predator had to give up long before they did. You were never the fastest. You were never the strongest, but you were built to outlast, and that, more than anything else, is the real reason you're standing here today, in skin instead of fur.